turn that off.
That it's,
Sorry, Jesse, I just realized I didn't hit the recording. Go ahead.
it's, you know, if you look at page 3, sorry, it's page 4 of the PDF. Page 3 of the report has the boundaries of the site, which abuts, is bordered by Atwood and Highland Street. The main parcel being 3 areas, and then technically it's an adjoining parcel at 0.697 acres. It's 3-2-C on the map, but that's also town owned and considered part of this subject site. We get into, you know, the first thing is the path of least resistance, which is the current zoning. It's a Residence B district. The report has an appendix, Exhibit A, which goes into all the things you can do in Residence B by right. We got into the feasibility. I think the most noteworthy part, you know, just at the current footprint or you know, area of the site of the building without any expansion. It's about 4 units according to a developer that we interviewed, and that's all detailed in the report. The max, you know, going with, let's say we, you know, remove that building and put up multiple 2 to 3 unit townhouse buildings, we were thinking 10 to 15 units could be developed on the site.
And that's if the building's removed?
Or built around it. We looked at the MRD. So the MRD that's in the code, or that's major residential development, that is really intended for subdivisions. So not really applicable to a site like this, to a 4-acre site where you want to effectively build apartments. You know, the MRD could be, and that's, it's in the report technically, but there's, you know, other ways, other paths forward, such as adaptive reuse, which I personally, you know, had some affinity for, because it could, this is just me speaking, by the way. Other people on the committee had different ideas about what the best thing to do would be. You know, theoretically, we could do adaptive reuse because it's historic, and you know, convert it to apartments with even some expansion. You can expand it up to 15% and get, you know, maybe a 5th and maybe a 6th unit. And then my thought was we could turn it over to the housing authority and have them manage it. We didn't get very far with that, however, because the housing authority is in flux. The housing authority, I believe, is being taken over by the Framingham Housing Authority. So there was nobody really to come on behalf of the housing authority other than Alex. And he wasn't sure because the administrator had left the state employee. So we'll see how that goes. The Framingham Housing Authority, I've heard, has, you know, tremendous resources and could be a great partner for us. We'll leave it up to Select Board and other committees to delve into that possibility. Multifamily housing for the elderly, we can actually, you know, per the town website that's managed by Karina, we can have 4 additional units permitted. We also discussed MBTA communities, which interestingly, last night at my planning board meeting, the map, I think I shared that with you, Dorian.
Yes.
I'll leave it to you whether or not you want to distribute that to the rest of this committee, or sorry, Shopsy. The planning department of the town came up with a map that does not include 21 Highland Street. It's kind of questionable as to whether or not 21 Highland could be credited toward the 10 acres. So as we've discussed, you need at least 10 acres within half a mile of the T-stop. But if it's town owned, it's unclear and indefinite as to whether or not it counts toward the 10 acres.
So I can clarify that, Jesse.
There's Tom. Thank God.
Yeah. So I've been.
I'm
there
going
was
on
talk. What's that? All right. Just to clarify that point, because we talked about that a little bit. You know, in the DHCD guidelines for these zoning districts, they have a definition of developable property. And it excludes areas that aren't developable for affordable, multifamily housing, and it includes public lands, because if the public lands are devoted to other public purposes, they're not available for development as multifamily housing. But after going over that a few times, I think we've come to the conclusion, and I think it's actually pretty clear at this point, that the 50-acre minimum zone size does not have to be all developable land. The definition of developable is in there, but for other purposes, and the 50 acres, including the 10 acres that have to be near, within a half mile of the MBTA station, do not have to be developable. So I do think, when all is said and done, that 21 Highland would be would count towards the 10 and would count towards the 50. And so I'm curious as to whatever the zoning map that people drew up, why they excluded 21 Highland. It may have been on that basis.
So Tom, that was the thinking in the planning department. This is just a first pass at MBTA.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
The thinking was, if it includes, any currently, residence occupied area, it doesn't stand a chance at town meeting of passing, which I do understand that sentiment. So, but again, this is all going to be hashed out when we have our
down the road
meeting. So Tom, I was just spinning through this thing. I was, basically on page 9 of the report.
Okay.
Right at like the section on 40B, if you want to take it from here. It's up to you.
Yeah, sure. Is that what you wanted to do, Dorian? Just to give you guys a summary of the report.
Yeah, I just want to have you guys go through the report. I mean, you wrote it, and then
I
figured if we had questions, after you do your presentation and go through everything.
Gotcha. And really, the way this is set up is that first section, just to kind of give you a big picture overview. We give an overview of the site, of course, and then we sort of go through in broad strokes the development feasibility and the economic feasibility. So when they're under the development feasibility, we looked at one, like physical developability. What can be built on the property? How big is it? And keep in mind on that piece that you all should understand this. Everyone in the town should understand this. This is not a feasibility study. We are not, we're lay people. We are not professional engineers. We are not professional architects. We are not professional affordable housing developers. We're just regular Joes who did a research project here. So, a lot of our information on the developability of the property, take with a grain of salt, because we're not going and doing soil studies and figuring out how many cubic yards of soil need to be moved around. We're just talking to developers and doing research and doing analysis of the zoning to figure out what can be built there, and what developers who have done these things for decades can look at the property and say, yeah, I can put X or Y on that property. So when you talk about just a physical developability, that's really something that's going to be more substantially developed as a concept down the road by proper professionals, not me and Jesse and Joe Palmer and And what?
Alex.
Sorry. So we go through the development feasibility, the zoning feasibility. I think we went into in a fair bit of depth, and the big takeaway from that section, we go into, is that we go into different provisions of the zoning bylaw that touch upon the possibility of doing multifamily development, and the takeaway is there's precious little in our zoning bylaws that allow for that. And practically speaking, nothing in our zoning bylaw allows for the development of this property at this location for multifamily housing. So that's kind of the point of going through the MRD doesn't work. All the quirks in that, it's really not designed for a project like this because that's really an open space preservation bylaw. We go through the adaptive reuse of historical buildings. That's good because you can convert historic buildings into multifamily. The problem with that is you're limited to whatever you can fit in the existing historical building. You cannot develop the rest of the property. The rest of the property has to remain open space. So that's a big limitation on the adaptive reuse, is that, we have 3.5, almost 4 acres that would be a lost opportunity that could not be developed if we did the adaptive reuse. Multifamily for the elderly, same thing. It's good in theory, but there's this crazy 7% limitation cap that's built in the bylaw that says no more than 7% of the total housing in Southborough can be elderly housing. That cap has essentially been reached. There's only 4 units left, which again is another bar to developing this 21 Highland property for under the multifamily for the elderly housing. So that's kind of the takeaway from the zoning analysis, is that there's nothing in the zoning that allows for this. We then go into other potential entitlement options, and the 2 principal ones that really could come into play are the MBTA communities, which has not been adopted yet, but that would be a zoning bylaw that would allow for multifamily housing. If this site was included in that, would be something in our bylaws, if it was adapted, that would allow for this project. And would be good.
I did just send the map that Jesse sent to me this morning. I just emailed that.
Okay. But that of course, the downside of that is it hasn't been adopted yet. And then the next thing, and really, if this site is going to be developed for multifamily housing, it would be a 40B project. That's really the only option from an entitlement standpoint right now, because of all the limitations I just mentioned. If a developer came in was going to convert this to affordable housing, it'd be a 40B project. And so, we give an overview of 40B, but that's sort of the takeaway of the zone of this zoning section. So we then go into the economics of affordable housing, and again, I have to state the caveat again that we're lay people. We're not developers. We're not affordable housing experts, and affordable housing is just not like conventional development where, you take money in, you figure out your cost of development, you figure out how much you can sell the units for, rent the units for, you pencil it all out. And if there's black at the bottom that's big enough, you say, good, it's a go. That doesn't work in affordable housing because, as we've said before, under conventional market conditions, it doesn't make any sense to develop affordable housing. The project costs are equal to or more than the cost that you would get from selling the units. So, for affordable housing to be financed, it really requires, as I've said before, a lattice work of different funding mechanisms, which is a combination and usually necessarily involves public support. So, we touch upon a little bit of there's several state grant programs and subsidy programs and support programs that are designed to create more housing. And that's a big public policy objective of the state, in particular the last governor, I think carries into the current governor. There's really a move that foster the creation of more multifamily housing and in particular affordable housing. So a lot of this in this first part of this section is just kind of going through, to the extent it's helpful, to go through how affordable housing, some of the fundamentals of affordable housing, starting with, just a basic definition of affordable. The affordability of housing is a generic term that applies across all income levels. And this, quite simply, the general conventional standard is that your housing costs can't be more, or shouldn't be more than 30% of your monthly income. And that applies whether you make $50,000 a year or $1 million a year. If your housing costs are more than 30% of your monthly income, the housing is not considered affordable to you. So really, it's when you get into the realm of public housing programs that talk about affordable housing. They're all done in terms of the target group that you want to make the housing affordable for. It's not great grammar. The population for which you want to create the housing. And so, so the point is, what target household income group do you want to set the rents or the purchase prices at, so that the housing costs associated with housing don't exceed 30% of that target group's income. And so in section 4A2, there's different examples of different programs that set the target group, household group, at different income levels relative to the area median income. So like 40B projects, the affordable units need to be affordable to an 80% of the households who make 80% of the area median income, which right now is $135,000. In the MRD, there's affordable housing component that's 51 to 80% of median income. Different ones. Just going through it, low-income housing tax credit program requires 60% of the area median income for a certain number of units, and so there are different percentages depending on the different programs that are brought to create the housing units. And so a lot of this is really just background inference. We give some examples of how this plays out in real life. So if your household family income is $100,000 and this is the purchase price of the unit, we have some illustrations that kind of suss out what the housing costs are for that unit, making some assumptions about interest rates and things like that, and how much is financed, and whether there's a condo fee and things like that, and the household's income. So I don't know that we need to go through those here, but it's more sort of, I don't know. We thought it'd be helpful just to kind of see in real life, what 30% of a given household's income looks like in real life, with a real purchase price, or I shouldn't say real, hypothetical purchase price, and how this all sort of plays out. And then we go through, and this is probably the gravamen of our report, is to the end, we really go through in section D of section 5D, I think it is, the forms of government support and how government support comes into play in what I referred to as this lattice work of different public support of a public project to make it work economically. And so, some of the things we talked about in our discussions and research as the subcommittee, we talked about the issue of whether the town should develop the project itself, if the town chose to do this project, or whether it should be developed by a private developer. And the clear takeaway on that question is that the town should not be the developer of the property. Every single housing expert I've talked to said that's a huge mistake. The town should not do that. It's not like a public works project, like a school building, where the town might take it on. In affordable housing, there are so many other developers that can do it more efficiently. And the two main issues with the town developing the project itself is that the town's subject to the public procurement statute, which makes things inefficient. And then secondly, and probably even more significantly, is that the town's subject to the
Prevailing Wage Act.
Prevailing wage laws, right? So that's a law that requires all public projects to pay all the construction workers at a wage established by the Division of Labor Standards. And when you cut through it all the affordable housing experts we spoke to have basically said, yeah, that adds, those two factors alone add something to the order of 40% of the costs onto a project by having the town develop it versus a private developer doing it. So that's probably a big takeaway from this. Then we talk about public-private partnerships, and that is really, in reality, if there's any takeaway from this, if this is going to be developed for affordable housing, this is really where it should and would be the pathway, is to have a private developer do it. And so, the affordable housing experts we spoke to, said that there are definitely, people that do this, there's developers who do this for a living, who do affordable housing projects, and they know how to navigate the Byzantine world of the alphabet soup of public grant programs, from DHCD and mass housing and the home. There's just a million different funding programs that come into play that they know how to navigate. But part of the way that the economics end up working is that the town usually, and here would apply as well, the town would need to devote some public resources to it as well to add to this foundation that makes the financing work. So the natural contribution the town would be making would be donating the land to the developer, which would basically eliminate their land acquisition costs. And then, there's also apparently some developers who specialize in converting school buildings to affordable housing. Apparently, school buildings are ready made for elderly housing, I guess, because of the wide hallways and just the way they're generally laid out. But it's often a combination of the municipality donating the land and the property, and then having some kind of public support in terms of finances. And most towns do use their affordable housing trust funds to make the economics of these projects work. And then I go into, a really good option is there's a lot of different for-profit and not-for-profit developers that do these things. There are for-profit developers that do this. They can make money on these because they figure out how to navigate all these funding programs. But community development corporations are also sort of they're in the business of developing affordable housing. And again, they know how to do it. They have the expertise to do it. And they're not, they are nonprofits, and their function is not to make, their objective is not to make a profit. They don't, of course, do these projects at a loss. They don't operate at a loss. They're not going to do it if they take a loss. But their objective is not to make a return for investors or a return for themselves. The way it basically works, and I'm probably going to oversimplify it here, is that they figure out how to put together the project together at cost. They basically get a development fee that's somehow prescribed by DHCD and how these things work. And that's how they subsist, is they get these development fees. But they otherwise develop these projects at cost, and then they continue to own them and run them as affordable housing. They have expertise in doing that as well. So that is a really good option, for if the town wants to develop this property, like a CDC would be a really good option. Now, one component of that is that these CDCs and I think other for-profit developers as well, I think the sort of common way of financing these, one of the common financing mechanisms is to use low-income housing tax credits. And you want to talk about a Byzantine program. I mean, I can't quite wrap my mind around how exactly it works, but in broad strokes, this low-income housing tax credit program is a national program that gives the developer a tax credit for every unit of affordable housing they create. And so what they do is they take these tax credits and then they sell them to investors, usually wealthy people who could use the tax credits. And then they use that money that they sell from and then use that money that they sell the tax credits to fund the actual development costs. I can't tell you more about than that because I don't really understand it. There's some syndication process, but I don't think it matters. But for purposes of this discussion, it means that for them to do that, these community development corporations need to have a minimum number of units created, because if they only do 5 units, the tax credit's just not big enough to get the purchase price from the sale of them to fund the development. There's some magic number of units that they need to have in order for the tax credit pool to be big enough to create a sale price, to create enough money to actually fund the project costs. And what they tell me that the rule of thumb is basically 30 units. That's a sort of, Mendoza line of the line they need to reach to where the tax credits are big enough to fund the project costs. It's not set in stone because they said other factors can come into play and I think it may come into play that if a town like ours devotes the land and also devotes, let's call it several $100,000s of affordable housing trust funds, that may give them a supplemental source of funding for that foundation that allows them to bring the number of units down. Maybe they can bring it down to 25 or 20. So there's this dynamic there on how many units they need to get, what the amount of funding is from the town, the land costs, the land contributions, all that kind of factors in the give and take and how you end up assembling this lattice work of funding mechanisms to cover the project costs. And so one thing that I think is worth looking at, if you haven't looked at anything else, originally the reaction to that might be, God, 30 units, that's a lot of units. And a good example as a case study, as we put it here, is this Hudson project that they converted an old unused police station site, which was smaller than our site. It was only 1.89 acres. Our site's, 3.5, 4 acres. And, this idea that having to have an apartment building with, 20 units in the apartment building, we all have in our minds that there's a big, ugly red box, with some dotted with exact square windows and just some god-awful building that we don't want architecturally. But if you look at this Hudson project that we put on here, it actually can look really good. So what they did is they put nice townhouse units on the front part of the property. They had 3 3-unit townhouses on the front of the property, on the frontage, just for the streetscape. And then in back of it, they put a multi unit apartment building, but it's actually a nice looking building. If you look at the layout, it's architecturally nice looking. If you look at the Madison Place units up in Southborough, these apartment buildings can look nice. And so that's why that example, there's some color photos in a report, that ended up being 40 units total. I think they had 9 units as townhouse units out front, and then another 30 something units in the apartment building and back. So, if you come around to this concept of having an apartment building, it doesn't have to be some god awful looking building, it can actually look pretty nice. So I don't know. I think, Jesse, does that capture it? That's pretty much a summary of the report.
Great job, Tom. I just want to say, Mr. Bizicle put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this. Joe, myself, and Alex certainly, pitched in to the best of our ability, but Tom kind of crushed it.
Thanks, Jan. It was a good team effort. Everyone had a lot of good input.
Burned up a lot of brain cells on this. So thank you, Mr. Bizicle.
Thanks, Jesse.
I think the only thing I wish we could have done differently, if we had a little bit more meat on the bone in terms of exploring how the housing authority could participate, but that is not the way the cards are stacked right now. So other than that, I think I'm happy with the report, and I think Tom and I, could, especially Tom, obviously, could easily, present this confidently and clearly to various boards and committees. So I support acceptance of the report. Thank you.
Well, I want to make sure I thank all the gentlemen on this report. You guys have put in about 18 months of, looks like a lot of research, hard work, and we are very appreciative of this. So thank you for doing all of this for us.
Thank you.
So does anybody have any questions, general questions or comments that they'd like to ask about the report? You've had time to go through it because it's been sent out for a while now. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask?
Yeah, I do. So everyone, thank you so much for putting together the report, Tom. It's a really very comprehensive report, and looks like a lot of work went into it. So just kind of the bottom line recommendation of what do you think would be the most efficient way of trying to develop affordable housing on the site? I mean, I read the report and thought the takeaway was to, you would pursue a public-private partnership where the town donates the land in exchange for a developer agreeing to develop affordable housing on it. And then I thought that, by ending with the example of the Hudson redevelopment, that was, you were maybe suggesting that as a model, but then really at the end where you said that you feel like you need 30 units as kind of a minimum to bring the tax credits into play, that seemed to throw a wrench in that. So I guess, what do you think is the most concrete step that we could take to move forward next?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to keep throwing out this caveat. This is a really complicated area, and I'm just a dopey commercial real estate lawyer. I'm not an affordable housing specialist, but this is in broad strokes what the specialists have told me the process is from here in terms of concrete next steps. So ultimately, to jump ahead for a second, I think ultimately, if the town decides to devote this to affordable housing, it is going to be send out an RFP. Yep. And let the developers come back of developers of different species, for-profit developers, community development, they'll come back. But in order to make that successful, come back to the beginning. There's a couple of things that they say need to happen before you get to that. One is that they say the town should do a feasibility study, a proper feasibility study with, done by proper professionals, engineers, to really do a deep dive into the property. Is there asbestos in the school building? What's a septic system like? Those are practical things that just a developer is going to want to get as a basic piece of information before they start sketching out the type of project that they would propose for this. That's one thing. And by the way, on that, there are grant programs specifically for this type of thing. Like if a feasibility study costs, let's just say $15,000, there's a DACD local initiative program that Sarah probably knows about and can probably help with. They're particularly designed to help municipalities with preliminary planning and and sort of groundwork for creating housing. So one is a feasibility study. Two is that they all say this is necessary. The town has to, at town meeting, declare this property to be surplus property. Mm-hmm. Because developers won't put in the time, because if developers won't put in the time and effort and resources to start planning, because they have to pay design costs and architectural fees and engineering fees to start putting together packages and planning these things. And they're not willing to devote those if putting in that money makes them still subject to a contingency that the town might not vote to use this actually for affordable housing. So they said the next thing you have to do is have town meeting vote to take it out of a dedication as a school and put it into surplus property. Apparently developers aren't going to be willing to touch it until they see that that's done. And then three, and by the way, if we ever do get into this process, there's a group called Mass Housing, who really specialize in guiding municipalities in this process. And so they really do. If we get serious about it, they can get in really, there's people there that are just consultants that'll help you walk through this whole process.
Mass Housing Partners, I believe.
Mass Housing Partnership, yes. Mass Housing Partnership. So the next thing that you can do and is encouraged to do is before you do an RFP, to do what's called an RFI, which is a request for interest. So it's not quite an RFP, but it's putting out preliminarily to developers in the world to say, hey, we have this surplus property in Southborough, 3.5 acres, former school building. We want to have it developed for multifamily affordable housing. Come talk to us. And so without them submitting a formal RFP, they'll start noodling out what they would do with the problem. They'll start taking a look at it. And there'll be preliminary conversations with different developers about what you're looking to do and what you're trying to accomplish. And that one sparks interest in the development community that this is a project that's going to be coming to RFP sometime soon. Gives them an opportunity to do some preliminary analysis of it and talk to the town about what they're looking for, so that when they do eventually submit an RFP, it'll be a project proposal that's consistent with what they now understand the town's looking for. And then, it's during some of these preliminary discussions where you can talk about things like what they would need if the town wanted this number of units, what they would need in terms of funding mechanisms to, again, Andrew, to your point, if 30 units was too much and maybe they could do 20 units if the town contributed $600,000 of affordable housing, obviously I'm making up numbers. You know what I mean? But those types of discussions can be had so that when you do ultimately get to the RFP process, you'll have developers that are already familiar with the process, already familiar with the site, familiar with what the town's looking for, and they can sort of tailor their RFP submission to what the town's looking for. And then, and then after the RFP process, that's when the town would decide what developer they wanted to go with. Does that help?
Yes.
Tom, I have a question. There would be I would assume a historic piece that would have to come into play. This building, I believe, is a historical building. So do we have any idea of what would have to occur to be able to tear that building down? If we went that path, which you'd get more units in, obviously. If we were to do that, what would we have to do?
So just give me take that last point first. I mean, it's not 100% clear that we would get more units by tearing it down. Okay. Unless we put up an apartment building. But I think, they tell me an apartment building can still fit on the property, even with the school building there. But, the school building itself, based on the, people we spoke to, they think they can get 5 or 6 units out of that school building. So, it's not, if the school building stayed, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be the worst thing in terms of just creation of units. Okay. But to go to your question, Dorian, if you tore it down, we'd be subject to the demolition delay bylaw in the town that if the historic commission wanted to delay it to do something else, that they could, they could, we know that process well by this
9
point.
months. We'd have to wait 9 months. Got it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And by the way, big picture, even if the town decided tomorrow that they absolutely let's flip the switch. We want to do this. We want to convert this school building to affordable housing and do this project on 21 Island. It's a long process from here to there. I mean,
Right.
we're talking probably 3 years before a shovel hits the ground. So, we're not like a developer who's on a timeline and has financing that's got to, this is going to be a long haul before a shovel goes into the ground. And then just on that historical building, I talked to some of them about, again, affordable housing specialists about, the fact that it's a historical building, the pros and cons, they're an old building that is kind of a pain in the neck to deal with old school buildings like this and bring, the electrical system up to code and deal with this potential asbestos issues. But there's also public, state funds for rehabbing historical buildings as well. So that comes into play. And what people have told me is that basically evens itself out. That the amount you get from these funding programs more or less offsets the additional costs that go into the adaptive reuse, for lack of a better term, of these historic buildings. So, a traditional developer that just wants to put up housing, get a quick hit, would rather just tear it down and put up, some townhouse or apartment building instead. But there are developers who like to, adapt historical buildings. That's what they specialize in. That's what they like to do. Then they know how to utilize the public funding for that. So I don't think keeping or getting rid of the school building in terms of the overall project cost financing mechanism ends up being a huge hit either way. And if the tiebreaker is it's easier politically to keep the school building, and that's more desirable in general, then that's definitely a feasible pathway.
Okay. I'm not saying to tear down. I'm just saying that would be an option. I mean, we'd have to look at all the options.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Jason, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just maybe I'll go backwards, but first start by thanking all those who are involved in this. Obviously, this is exactly what we were hoping for with the joint effort between Capital and SHOPC when this subcommittee was formed. So thank you for all your efforts. I know a lot of work went into it. I'm going to start with the teardown piece and just remind everyone of a few facts. At least the board that was sitting when this property went out to a public RFP last, I guess almost 2 years ago now at this point, there was no desire to tear down the building. That was actually a condition that it had to stay. And we did get a bid. It didn't end up going through, and we'll kind of leave that off to the side. But and it was a decent sized bid, depending on how you measure dollars, and it did include affordable, which is kind of where this all sort of came up. They just couldn't, pull the final strings on getting that through the RFP process. So I would encourage you that it's probably the easier path here is because it is in the National Registry. Yeah. I have, no stake in what the Historic Commission thinks in any way, shape, or form, but I just would encourage you to think about preserving that. It's an easier path because I think we've proven now through your report, as well as through some of the supplemental stuff that came out through the original RFP, that additional lots can go on that site that could be also deemed affordable. And as you know, there's an elevator on the site too. Obviously, we'll need some rehab over time. So just some food for thought. I guess my bigger picture question for the group, and Dorian, this may be a future SHOPC agenda item, is hearing this report. I think one of the things that Capital needs to help inform a little bit here is South Union has a ton of capital that's needed next year to just keep the departments that operate recreation and youth and family in there and have it be safe to occupy. So we're going to have to make a decision of whether we start making some capital improvements to the property or whether we go down one of these paths. I guess the question for Shopsy, and I don't think that this is necessarily a capital question, is when you hear this report and you understand, what other potential inventory there may be in town to achieve all of your goals, is this the right property to actually put affordable on? Or are there other properties that you think may be better, worth their time? Or do you need to do this property plus another property? I think that's kind of the question we need to answer at this point, so that we understand how to move forward with, band-aiding the building to keep it open and operational until a final decision's made, because I agree with the comments Tom just made. It's going to take years before any of this comes to fruition, if we go down this path.
Well, as of right now, Jason, if you look at where we are percentage-wise with housing, with the DHCD, and where we're going to need to be, and looking at safe harbor, right now we're looking at, we actually need 66 units. On January 1st of 25, that's going to increase by 18. And that information is based off of the DHCD and the HPP. So we have those numbers. I mean, those could change plus or minus a little bit, I guess, depending on economics and whatever factors come into play. Again, the state kind of mandates that stuff to us. I think we're going to need this area and other areas. There's no way we're going to shove 66 units plus possibly 18 more on that site anyway. So we're going to need several sites in order to get to the numbers we need to have. That's just my thought on that, but I don't want to tear that building down either. So I know I would like to see us try to work with that building and develop it if we could.
So just to add my 2 cents to it, Jason, I think that this particular site is a unique opportunity for affordable housing, because any other development anywhere else in town is going to be probably on private land with a private developer's land, where they're going to want, at best do a 40B project where only 25% of the units are going to be mandated to be affordable. This is, I think, a unique situation where it's town-owned land and we have more control over what happens on the land. And so I don't know how many other opportunities are going to be to create a truly full affordable housing project where 100% of the units can be affordable. I think when you're talking other multifamily, other parts of town, yes, but in terms of an opportunity to create a fully affordable housing project, I don't think there's going to be many opportunities beside this property. And on top of that, it is within the radius of the MBTA. And just leaving aside technical compliance with the MBTA community's bylaws, it is, the policy of the MBTA community law is to have more multifamily within relative close proximity to transit stations. That's one of the public policies behind the law, so that people can have access to, to downtown and have more housing in those to encourage that type of development. So I think this particular site meets that criteria as well. So I just think this particular site is a unique opportunity for affordable housing. I don't think we're really going to see another opportunity like this come up.
Great, thanks. That answers my question. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? For right now, obviously, this is just a preliminary discussion on this incredibly wonderful report that I'm sure we will be discussing a lot more in the future. Jesse, you made a motion that we should adopt this report. Yes. Okay, you can't give me a thumbs up. You have to say yes verbally.
Sorry, something's wrong with my device here.
That's okay.
So moved.
Okay. Do anybody want to second that?
Second.
Okay. Oh. So this will be a roll call vote. Andrew?
Aye.
Jesse?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And Dorian is aye. Jason? I don't think it's a joint meeting. You should probably make a motion on that as well, or not a motion.
We don't have a quorum.
Oh, you don't have to.
Quorum.
Okay. All right. Just making sure. All right. Then we should be all set on that. Okay. Guys, again, thank you so much. This is an incredible report. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve. Where's my thing? The dates on those are, what is it, February 1 and 27, if I'm remembering correctly, Sarah?
Dorian, do you want 2 separate motions on that, or?
Yeah, well, do we have any changes on any of them?
I have a lot of changes on the February 1st minutes.
All right, so let's do 2 separate motions then. Okay, does anybody have changes on the February 1st minutes?
Sorry,
Andrew?
can I just pull them up real quick?
Sure.
My only comment is when we talk about this 21 Highland report, we go on for like half a page about how I'm late on getting my report done, and can we pare that down? I don't want to avoid it, but we need a half page of discussion about how
you're talking about in the minutes.
Yes. Is that what we're talking about?
I didn't even see that.
Yeah, so this is on the February 1st minutes, lines 23 through 32. I wasn't going to suggest editing the substance of it or anything, but just some spelling and typographical things on line 25. I guess that's should be indicated rather than indicted. And on line 29 to 30, where it says Mr. Dennington indicated there were talks about attendance on the building. I don't know what that means, so I think we should strike that. Those were the edits that I had for lines 24 through 32. Then lines 45 through 48 were kind of a run-on, and it was a discussion about the SME designation. It looked like it was like a carryover from maybe a different meeting where this was discussed. But if you look at lines 95 through 97, the same thing is discussed here. So I think we just need to go back and look and make sure that the language in Sarah, are you here?
I'm here.
Yeah. Do you know whether the I can't, since I'm going for my phone right now, I can't access this, but what was the date on which we the select board voted to do the SME designation? Was it February? Yeah.
The date on it, I don't know. I could go back through, but I know that they were going to vote on it, and then
we did.
Out, but I'm sorry, I don't know the actual date.
Okay, so I guess the minutes need to be corrected to reflect that either one of these is not in the right place, either the text in 45 through 48 or the text in 95 through 97, and I don't know right off the top of my head which one is the correct one, but I would be comfortable approving the minutes with just, if someone was to go back and look and just make sure that we've got the correct discussion in the correct place. I think that
I think that's a very good idea.
Okay. All right.
I would agree with that, Andrew.
And then on line 56, minimum is spelled incorrectly. in the discussion about MBTA communities, just to make it clearer, I think what we were talking about is, and Jesse, please correct me if I'm wrong, the document that the planning board submitted to the state was the action plan. Is that it? I don't know if Jesse's here.
Yeah, I'm
so.
here. And my phone is just killing me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Dennington.
Okay, so on line 40 on 84, instead, at first there should be Miss Jasinski instead of Mr. Jasinski.
I would like to do this instead of me.
Yeah. So I think it should say Miss Jasinski indicated she had not received a copy of the final action plan submitted to the state. And on line 85, decimate should be disseminate. Also, line 85, where it said Mr. Biscule asked in the documents, it should be asked if the documents were in fact submitted. Line 88. So this is referring to something that I said. Instead of saying he expressed the planning form was a fairly document to submit, it should say he expressed that the action plan form was a fairly simple document to submit.
Yeah, and actually I'm seeing, thanks for bringing up some of these changes, Andrew. I just found one myself. Line 57 and 58, Mr. Stein stated his concerns on return on investment in bringing edits forward to town meeting. I'm not sure what that's referring to.
I think what you're referring to is
return on investment.
Gonna have to go back to the tape. I think that was if we had to make edits and changes at town meeting. If I'm remembering correctly.
Okay, now as you asked that, I really don't know what that's referring to. But
well, it was in the context of MRD. I think I was, and it says, okay, let's go back a little bit. Line 54, 15 Highland Street, it's 21 Highland was the site I was referencing. So that should be corrected.
And then line 72 should be changed the same way then.
Yeah, and then I think we should strike, since I have no idea what that is. I think we should strike Mr. Stein stated his concerns on return on investment and bring edits forward to town meeting since there are other factors such as the MBTA communities requirement. I think we should strike that entire sentence for the minutes.
Okay.
That makes sense to me. I had one last edit I was going to mention, which is on line 155 to change refuse to declined.
Which line is that, Andrew?
Line 155.
I don't think I've ever heard so many changes in the minutes. Okay.
By the way, who's keeping the minutes? Is it Kay still doing them?
No.
Oh, you're doing them?
Yeah. I must have been drinking when I did these. Okay, we're good. We're good.
How are you doing this? You going back and reviewing it again to get all these details?
Oh man, I'm gonna go back and listen to the tape again is what's gonna happen. I'm sorry, guys. All right. Those are the changes for 2-1. Do you want to see them before we send them in or not? Because there's an awful lot of changes.
I don't need to see them again.
Okay, so approve as amended. Okay. So we have a motion. I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Do I have a second?
I move that we approve the February 1st 2023 minutes as amended.
So, yeah, seconded.
Okay, so that's a roll call vote. Jesse?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
We have lost Doug. And Dorianne, our Jasinski is also aye. Okay. Let's move on to the February 27th minutes.
And I apologize. Just before the meeting this morning, I went and started to review the minutes, and I noticed a lot of changes on the February 1st. So I haven't had the chance to really go through the February 27th minutes as much. So I would like the opportunity to just hold them and review them at the next meeting. I think we'd still be okay in being compliance with the open meeting law requirements about finalizing our minutes.
Okay, I'm more worried about the minutes being correct than that. So, okay, but we'll just move this to the next meeting, and that way I may go in and change those anyway.
Yeah.
While I'm making all these other changes, so we'll be good. So we have the February 1st minutes as amended. I'll get those into Kate, and then we'll just bring these minutes to the next meeting.
And apologize, one last thing on the February 1st minutes, if I didn't already mention on line 10, and should be Alexander Frisch.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Okay, thank you, Andrew. All right, Sarah, anything on grants, possibilities, anything coming up for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know we have a limited amount of time, so I'll just
we need
do
to
a
make
brief
this quick.
overview. So yeah, we worked with Vanessa to submit this the expression of interest for the One Stop. We were looking for just additional grant funding in order to continue to review the bylaws and to make recommendations to town meeting to change them. I mean, Tom, you know, in your report, obviously you and the committee, you know, highlighted a lot of the issues that that the current bylaws face in terms of creating affordable housing and multifamily housing. And so just kind of to continue that work is what we put in for. The EOI feedback should be in relatively soon. So I reached out to Vanessa for her to share that with us so that we can know what to change or what kind of feasibility that we might have in terms of submission for the actual like grant, because again, this is just the EOI process. The other thing that I wanted to just bring up really quickly was the housing choice designation. I talked about that briefly in a few months back. Dorianne and I had an opportunity to meet with Felipe Zamberlini from the DHCD, and he talked to us a little bit about what it would take in order to meet that designation and requirement. So in order to be designated as a housing choice community, you have to have at least a 5% increase in new units over the previous 5 years. So he was able to send us what that looks like for 2017 to 2021. So right now, DHCD has Southborough as having 3,433 units of year-round housing. And so the total new units in the 2017 to 2021 timeframe was 69 units, which is 2% of the total housing increase. So we would have to get that up by a significant amount in order to meet the housing choice designation, which would enable us to have access to additional grant funding. So if a larger project were to come through, we could potentially get to that threshold. But right now, it does not look like Southborough will be meeting that threshold in the next couple of years. I'm going to do some research and investigation with the building inspector, the building department, to see, what kind of units we added in the past 2 years. Because again, this is only through 2021. So what have we added in 2022 and 2023 to kind of look at that? Because he encouraged us to do so. since they did not have the data yet for the current years for 2018 to 2022, which would be the 5-year time frame. So those are the high level things that we're working on right now. But, as Tom said, there's a lot of other opportunities. I also did reach out to Mass Housing. I'm hoping to hear back from them on a few other grant opportunities.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate your work on that. All right, why don't we quickly look at dates for our next meeting? So don't forget we had, I did send out an email. So Kathy has moved the MBTA discussion with all the different groups to April the 10th now. So it went from the 4th to the 11th, and now we're at the 10th. So if you could just, please check your schedules and let me know if you can attend, because I will need to post a meeting.
I know I can do it, obviously, since I'm going to be at the meeting anyway. But.
Right. Well, I figured you'd be there. Thanks. I just want to, I'm just probably going to send an agenda, post a meeting with an agenda, just to cover us, but just let me know if you're going to be there. What about next meeting? When you guys want to go to early May? Do you want to?
At this point for me, I would. April vacation doesn't work, and then week of May 1st wouldn't be bad.
Anybody?
Works for me.
May 1, May 2, May 3. Anybody?
That's all. Those are fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too.
I guess if we want John evenings.
We would do the evening.
All right, so why don't you want to just go to May 1st?
As long as it's not a Monday.
Not a Monday, so not May 1st, Tuesday. Or you want a Monday or you don't want a Monday?
Not Monday.
What about Wednesday, May 3rd?
Yeah, that would work.
All right.
That would work for me.
All right, Monday. Oh my God, Wednesday, May 3rd. We'll do Shopsy.
In the evening?
We will do 7:30.
Okay.
At night.
Joanne, do we have room in the agenda? I can't remember if we have something in our agenda for other business before the board or anything like that.
No, I only had grants, this capital reports, the Shopsy capital report, and the minutes.
Oh yeah, the only thing that was listed was next meeting under other. Well, there is an other business section that's posted. I don't know.
Yeah, am I allowed to speak under that?
Yes,
I believe so.
Thank you. So, something that I think that we want to start thinking about as a committee is making or advocating for an adjustment to the charter to have, instead of an appointment from housing authority, have another at-large member. Just that change. Certainly appreciating Mr. Frisch's contribution. It's just that before Mr. Frisch, it was a struggle to get anybody from housing authority to step up. And now it does seem like there's some, Mr. Frisch's term was up actually on the housing authority, but there is no election for that because of some kind of technicality with the housing authority at the state level. So it's, very likely we will have a vacancy, protracted vacancy if we don't make this change with the warrant article at the next town meeting. Andrew Dennington, do you have anything to comment on that? Since we are a select board, subcommittee, so it would have to be sponsored by select board.
Okay. Yep. And the natural time to do something like that, I think, would be around June 30th, when the end of the fiscal year, and I think a lot of terms. And the pros of that I see are there's a lot of people, like Doug. I don't know if he's still here on the call, that they really have a background in this stuff. People who work in town and have who might not be on the housing authority, but they've got skills, private sector skills that are really well suited to this committee. So that's something that leans in favor of an at-large appointment.
So I spoke with Mr. Haggerty about this. He was under the impression that it had to go to town meeting for a warrant article. If that's not the case, and the select board can just make the change, fantastic. But
otherwise, we probably want to go to the fall town meeting and get it done.
If there is going to be one, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I just kind of wanted to throw it out there. We can all start thinking about it.
Okay.
But other than that, I would move to adjourn.
Second. Okay, all those in favor, Tom?
Aye.
Jesse?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Dorianne is an aye. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your help this morning.
Thanks all.
Great job.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
See you May 3rd.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
And it'll be
Will
Zoom.
do.